Good morning. Good morning. I'm Dr. Glenda Bumgarner, and I'm your facilitator this morning for our wonderful panel. I want to thank Tony and the board members for the Lorain County Chamber for facilitating a very, very thought-driven discussion this morning. I think the panel, you'll see some of the questions that you've sent in, very impressive. I am the External Partnership Engagement Senior Director with JobsOhio. And for those of you not familiar with JobsOhio, we are a private nonprofit organization responsible for business and attraction in the state of Ohio. And it's been my pleasure to work with communities for the last 2 years across the state with local elected officials, commissioners, mayors, committed citizens who really are working to make their partnership better. Economic development is a team sport, for sure. And this morning I loved, I've seen Brian's work, I've been to Dayton, and 20 years ago, 15 years ago, really the city was just, it was really bad. And so was Columbus, by the way. And so the growth that he was talking about, those are long-term commitments that, sustain even over mayors and term limits and chamber leadership. If a good plan that can be worked through time and partnerships that are preserved and retained. And that's why I'm excited to have the discussion with you this morning. Tony had asked me specifically what my connection was to Northeast Ohio. And it's very interesting because in 1956, during the Hungarian Revolution, my father came to America and came in through Cleveland and was here for a while with family and sponsors, and then migrated down to Central Ohio. So I live west of Columbus, between Dayton and Columbus, actually. So a little bit about me. And with that, what I was going to do is if we could ask each of the panelists maybe to describe, introduce yourself, if that's okay, a few minutes, and then what we'll do is we'll see what do you see as Lorain County's biggest asset. So you can hold off on that question, or you can do the introduction first. So let's start. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. My name is Larry Sansom. I'm privileged to represent a company called Thogus Products. We're a custom injection molding company out of Avon Lake, Ohio. We've been in business since 1950 and have evolved over time. And so, Tony, thanks for the invite, and really proud to sit here and talk to you guys about manufacturing in the county and how it really spurs our economic background.
Yes. I'm Radhika Reddy with Ariel Ventures. We are urban finance, public-private finance company that helps CDCs like Brian across the country put together public-private finance with historic tax credits, new markets, and all the various public-private finance tools to help development in low-income communities. And I'm also representing Ariel on Broadway, which is the rehab of the old Spitzer building, which is an offshoot of our consulting business. We got into real estate development and would like to talk about some of the financing that we use to help make these projects happen. Yes.
Great, good morning. My name is Jacob Diritsky. I am with Team NEO. Team NEO is a regional economic development group. It represents 18 counties in Northeast Ohio, in addition to Lorain County, the major markets of Cleveland, Akron, Canton, and Youngstown. At a high level, we work to grow companies that are here and bring new ones into the region, focusing on 3 strategies to help build that over time: innovation, talent, and the development of sites and competitive sites inventory. We'll get more into that later, but at a high level, JobsOhio is a state partner. Folks like Jerry Good and many municipalities throughout Lorain County are local partners, and we help to connect for business needs throughout that network.
Hi, good morning. I'm Marcia Ballinger. I'm the president of Lorain County Community College for the past 3 years, but have been at Lorain County Community College for the past 28 years, having a variety of leadership roles in economic and workforce development, having been a couple of those, and am proud to serve on Team NEO's board as well, because we know that economic development goes beyond Lorain County and certainly is regional, and the role that the community college plays, which I'll be sharing, certainly more about in terms of growing the talent pipeline, not only for what is here today, but also where we're going. And really appreciate Tony's leadership and the entire Lorain County Chamber Board for really focusing on today's summit. So thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for your introduction. So we're going to begin by asking the very first question, which is, what do each of you see as Lorain County's biggest asset? So we'll start with you, Dr. Ballinger, please.
Okay, thank you. So I have a very recent answer to that, and I'm reflecting on Brian's presentation and some of your closing, things we can do. And one of them was, create the vision. What does the future look like, that preferred future? And so many in this room this morning have been part of the vision network that Lorain County Community College had put together, because we know that it is collectively through all of our stakeholders and engagement that we create that greater outcome. It's not 1 + 1 + what, right? It's the collective impact. And so it is that spirit, I think, within Lorain County, and that commitment to work together, to collaborate, and to look at what is that preferred future. And so I just pulled this up while we were sitting here because it made me think of your presentation. So over the past 6-7 months, we had more than 1,300 stakeholders come together to help look at and create what is Lorain County's preferred future. And this depiction came out of the first evening of the Vision Network. And the Vision Network, there were about 150 people, both representing sectors that are represented today, as well as many others, and internal stakeholders, students, faculty, and staff. And so we wanted to remove any barriers to just look at it, not through the lens of Lorain County Community College, but where do we want to go? And so this was what the artist took away from that night as she was listening to the feedback, and then we did table talk presentations, and this was a lot of the input from it. And so up in the upper left-hand corner, I thought is so appropriate for today's conversation, because it was to become nationally known as a talent destination while we're focused overall for the community on a vibrant community. And as you can see throughout all of that, from community and the schools and our employers and the right partnerships, the culture of entrepreneurship, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then our friend Pepper, the humanoid that I should have brought Pepper here today. Pepper is one of our newest students with artificial intelligence, is looking toward that future. So I just thought, from an asset perspective, right, it's coming together as a community to collaborate, to lead, and as partners to know when is it appropriate to lead, when is it appropriate to collaborate, and because we're all working toward the same outcome.
Excellent. That's wonderful. And thank you for sharing this. It reminds us that sometimes we're always so busy looking at what we don't have that we sometimes don't slow down long enough to see what we really do have. So thank you. Thank you, Marcia. How about you, Jacob?
Yeah, and just to start, that is really cool. And I'll say I've met Pepper. I think Pepper's smarter than me. It's scary, but it is what it is. I'll point to two things. One, quite honestly, I'm not pandering to a board member or a colleague, is Lorain County Community College's leadership over time. Frankly, they have brought, since Dr. Roy Church through Dr. Ballinger, just an innovative approach to working with business, developing solutions for talent, thinking about the market and thinking about, as Dr. Ballinger always says, the talent needs of today, but the talent needs of the future. Because if you think about supply chains, business needs over time, innovation, talent, a lot of the things that we care about, none of that happens when you're talking to companies if you don't have the talent that they need. It's the number one thing that comes up constantly, and LCCC has done a great job of partnering, not only locally, but as advocates for a regional approach throughout Northeast Ohio. So thank you for that. The second I'd say is the embedded nature of supply chains here. When we talk to companies, you can see a piece of all of Northeast Ohio represented in Lorain County. So whether that's the chemical and polymer cluster in Summit County, whether that's automotive supply chain down through Youngstown, whether that's metal fabrication and metal processing in the greater Cleveland area, you have a piece of all of that here. And that's a unique asset. You see concentrations of that activity, but the deepness of your supply chains, while it can be challenging given the cyclicality of manufacturing and recessions and things like that, is actually a huge opportunity in our view as you think about Industry 4.0 and as you think about leveraging the strategies of LCCC and others throughout the region. So those would be ours.
Very nice. Thank you, Jacob. And interesting, Jacob was talking about the supply chain. 70 to 80% of jobs created come from our existing companies. So the importance of, we hear about economic development in the attraction game, but the retention and expansion opportunities are enormous. You, Radhika?
Yes, as a new entrant into a Lorain community, some of the main reasons I came to Lorain County, city of Lorain and the county from Cleveland is definitely what I noticed as the public-private partnership and the lake assets. As many of you know, Tom Brown from the port attended a wedding at my building in Cleveland and was very entrepreneurial and convinced me about how Lorain is ripe for investment. And the passion and the partnership, and with the Chase, Mayor Chase, both of them were so entrepreneurial, and the public sector support that we had, and added with the community foundation support with Cindy, and then the college, and all the Chamber of Commerce. So for me, I found the public-private partnership was really excellent here. And for a small development, for a development of the hotel, the support we received was phenomenal, and the assets of the lake, the views of the lake, I find this is ripe for development. It is a big risk because the rents are very low. Like as Brian said, the early projects suffer a lot because the rates aren't high yet, so cash flow is an issue. Right. But we hope the support continues with the port and the city and the chamber and the council and the county. Everyone's been great, so that's a big asset for me.
That's wonderful. One thing that Radhika didn't share is her female-owned business has done phenomenally well. She's a real champion of small business development and helping others. How about you, Larry?
So it's a great question, and I think about it from the angle of economics. I've, throughout my professional career, I've had the opportunity to live in a couple different places in our great nation. I've lived on the East Coast, and I lived in the Midwest in greater Chicagoland. Born and raised here in Lorain County, so I came back. And I came back for a couple reasons. Number one, if I think about doing business in this area, I just think about our infrastructure. We have great roadways. Go to some parts of the nation, you can't move goods in and out. We have great waterways. Overall, our utilities are very competitive and very reliable. And just simply stated, the cost of doing business in this area is very competitive.
Yes.
So we have to capitalize on that and find ways of bringing industry, bringing jobs to us, because we can compete.
I couldn't agree more. We've, again, just from a statewide perspective, when you come to Lorain and you see the water and you see the college and you see some of the assets that you have here, they truly are remarkable. And I think from our perspective, we've got a great start going on our conversation this morning, but what I was hoping that we could do now is we are going to offer you the opportunity to ask some questions, but we've got a few other questions that had been presented. So we're going to go through those, and then we'll take your questions a little later if that's okay. So why don't we do this? Let's start with you, Jacob, may we?
Sure.
Okay, so, and you touched a little bit on this in your first response, but what is Lorain County's role in regional economic development, and how does it align or differ from the rest of Northeast Ohio?
Yeah, good question. So I think the way we approach this is to not think about today, but to think about the past 25 or 30 years, and to think about Northeast Ohio and the reputation of Northeast Ohio, and maybe the misperception that folks have had about what our economy is. And what our economy is here in 2018 is a dynamic economy still led by manufacturing that's diversified in a bunch of different ways. So something we've done recently is we talk to companies, and we talk to companies like Hitachi in Silicon Valley who's interested in investing here, is take on the Rust Belt narrative sort of straight on, which is employment losses in manufacturing have been hard. We lost 180,000 jobs in the last 25 years, and it was painful, and it shaped a Rust Belt narrative. But what it hid was underneath all that, we were becoming much more productive. Manufacturing productivity was growing by 90%, projected to grow another 70% in the coming decade. Our products were being globally competitive and exported all around the country. Oh, and at the same time, we were diversifying into different sectors of the economy, be that headquarters, professional services, other things which made us less susceptible to downturns in the economy. So I think at a macro view, we're still very much an economy that makes things, and I think Lorain County is a microcosm of that. When you look at Lorain County, 30% of everything you produce in the county still comes from manufacturing. 17% of your employment base comes from manufacturing. That's even higher than those regional levels are that I mentioned. But that said, it offers a tremendous opportunity and a challenge, right? If you think about both lenses, you know, we were talking, Larry and I, earlier about the manufacturing landscape right now. Talent's a challenge, right? Innovation's a challenge. But when we go out to Silicon Valley and talk to executives from Hitachi who are thinking about Industry 4.0 and the industrial Internet of Things, they're extremely excited about the 7,000 manufacturers in Northeast Ohio, which are an opportunity for their business line to come in with new technologies and new processes and change the way we think about doing business and making things here. So what I would say is we're still a manufacturing economy. Lorain is still a vital component of that. We've evolved, but now it's thinking about Industry 4.0 and how we take that next step as a manufacturing economy.
Very good. Thank you, Jacob. So Radhika and Larry, any thoughts to the question, which is, again, just to repeat, how does Lorain County's role in the region, does it align or differ from other areas in Northeast Ohio that you see or familiar with?
So for me,
That was a big sigh, did you?
it was, because I'm just back. I've only been back in Northeast Ohio for a short period of time, so I'm not sure if I can differentiate it right now, right? I think we are all blessed with some great things, but I think we have similar challenges across the area. It comes down to that partnership that Brian talked about, right? We're all involved in this together, and it's the touch points that we create to enable the whole area to be successful.
How about you, Radhika? Any thoughts? If not.
I mean, just that, I mean, I'm coming from Cuyahoga County to Lorain County. Definitely, it's smaller and more collaborative to some extent. And I mean, I'm only been in the city of Lorain, so I'm too new. I do not know much about the whole county, but from what I've seen is you can make much more of a difference in a smaller area compared to a bigger area. So that's what I've noticed.
So the opportunity to make a bigger difference. Because you are a little smaller than Cuyahoga County. Marcia, since the college knows the need for an educated workforce in the future, whether this is with high school diplomas, certifications, associate degrees, bachelor's or above, what is the college plan to provide educational pathways for emerging and transitioning workforce?
So a lot of our planning and curriculum development take place with our employers. And when I was talking about how do we, ensure that we're educating for today and tomorrow, part of that tomorrow is having the conversations with our employers about where they see their workforce going or their business or manufacturing or what have you. So a very recent example of that that I'll share with you is around the field of microelectromechanical systems, MEMS. You know, years ago, we didn't know what MEMS, was all about.
Right.
When we started hearing from employers about sensors and data analytics and creating a different type of automation, we had to invite them to the table in a very different way than what higher education traditionally had done, which was in an advisory capacity. The flipped model now is the employer designing the curriculum with their ends in mind, and us as facilitators in that process, and then integrating it in a way that creates models where the students are directly exposed to that through a learn and earn strategy. So in the MEMS program that we started with an associate's degree, and now we have a bachelor's degree that, in fact, LCCC is the only college right now, in a community college, that has a bachelor's degree. It was because the employers, and in the case of MEMS, we worked with about 25 employers across many industry sectors, from Mansfield north as far east as Youngstown and as far west as Toledo, to actually design that curriculum. And so we just, in this past year, unveiled it, and students are now enrolled in the program. And I have a very quick news clip from Channel 19 that reinforces what the program is, but I think it brings to life the answer to your question in a way that truly illustrates how are we planning for that future.
And do I have to push a button?
I'm sure.
Oh,
And Julian.
wonderful.
It's a skills gap that hasn't been filled, and companies are in need.
And that's where this lab at Lorain County Community College is coming in and training the next generation of mechanical and electrical engineers.
So the school is now on track to become Ohio's first community college to offer a Bachelor of Applied Science in Microelectronic Manufacturing.
Whew, they sound smart, don't
Oh,
they?
yeah.
Damon Maloney is live for us on campus this morning. And Damon, the professors you spoke to have been saying there are a lot of jobs waiting for these graduates out there.
Out there, Neha and Julian, they tell me that there are dozens of companies right here in Northeast Ohio that are hiring simply because their workforce is retiring. So what are the students doing? So this right here is a printed circuit board. It's kind of small and hard to see, so we have some additional video playing there. It's zoomed in to kind of give you a better sense of this work. So the students are designing, assembling, and manufacturing these pieces, and it's intricate work because a lot of the pieces are the size of a pencil tip.
Make sure, folks, you grab your third chip resistor.
Lab coats, face masks, filter lighting, conditions that allow students to work on printed circuit boards and other pieces without contaminating them.
If you get a degree here, you could be working at Ford making sensors for cars. You could be making sensors for anything, lights, phones, computers. It's very versatile in that way.
Jake Hugel is less than a month into his studies here in the hands-on micro-electromechanical systems program.
That means military spec. That means it's more expensive. It's more accurate.
Right now, Lorain County Community College offers a 2-year associate's degree developed in partnership with local businesses. But now, a bachelor's program is being developed. The Ohio Department of Higher Education is finalizing the approval. A 4-year degree sets students up for more advanced, higher-paying jobs. Johnny Vanderford is an assistant professor.
Describe the type of work that the students are doing and the practical uses.
The type of work that students are doing involves soldering, handling of very small electronic parts, very sensitive electronic parts, sensors and microelectronics that communicate with computers and biomedical devices. The degree is designed to be affordable.
The school's 2-year program costs $6,500. The bachelor's program will cost about $15,000. Far less than the $60,000 or more students would pay at a traditional college or university.
Amazing in my perspective because I'm going to be starting my adult life with no college debt.
They can get a job, they can buy a house and start life, get a family and everything with minimal to no college debt.
Vanderford told me there's dozens of companies locally looking to hire. Hugel is working his way toward that end goal.
3 weeks into the program and I have an interview for a paid internship, so it's a really good deal.
So you heard him talk about those paid internships so students earn while they learn. That's a requirement for the program. And I'm working right now on a web extra. It's a conversation with one of the companies that works with the community college here on their program. They talk about their hiring practices and how the students really benefit from the programs here. Getting answers live in Elyria, Damon Maloney, Cleveland 19.
This is such a great idea. We know that Northeast Ohio is so big on manufacturing, and I did a couple stories on companies here, and they've talked so much about how difficult it is to find skilled workers that know what they're doing, and I think this is it. This will fill that void.
Yeah, apparently the jobs are out there too and well paying.
Earn while you learn.
Love it. That is amazing.
Thank you. So that's an example, I think, of the way in which we plan for the future as well as what's here and now. And another one that I would point to is the Industrial Internet of Things. So as Team NEO, for example, then from a regional perspective, does its research and work and around the clusters, then how we connect with partners throughout the region to take what those needs are and to look at that alignment and how do we fill the pipeline with students and starting within our middle schools and high schools, as well as our adults who need retraining and those already employed to upskill them. So it's the entire ecosystem.
Well, and that's a very interesting point because I think what Marcia's referencing is recognizing what companies, what products, and as Jacob said, suppliers are in this region. Because, if you're producing an academic student who doesn't have alignment with a career opportunity in this region, they go someplace else. People do follow jobs. And one of the things that we love, we've identified 9 driving industries in the state of Ohio as a whole. And we've got some cross like fintech, financial and technology. That may not necessarily be the driving industry here, as Jacob said, maybe polymers. There's some others that you've identified, but when the college is aligning with what's here, then your students get to go to work, and that's a beautiful thing, and employers stay because they have the talent they need. And I will say just one quick caveat is Ohio's GDP over the last 6 years had raised 15%, which was higher than our regional peers, but in those 9 driving industries, the GDP rose 25%. So you can see that not all jobs are created equal, and where we put our efforts and our public resources to help move that is so very important. Way to go, that's phenomenal, I love it. Okay, so Radhika, so much what we hear about small businesses is the need for adequate financing. How do we attract businesses to Lorain County and help grow our own through an entrepreneurial pipeline? If financing is unavailable or hard to come by, how can we create opportunities for financing so these businesses are able to be open and thrive?
Yeah. I think Brian explained very well. Community development entities like Brian. Here, I think the port has taken some lead in economic development. You do need some type of lending institution, CDFIs, community development entities, to kind of help those businesses where you may not get the regular bank loan. Just in our own development, it was very difficult as a small business. Why that building sat empty for 15 years is because the construction costs, the project will not cash flow with the amount of cost you need for construction. And the rents are very low in Ohio. So development is not easy because you'll be in negative position. Valuation, appraisal is lower than the cost. And so that's why you see buildings sit empty. And you have so many buildings they give you for free because it's having negative value with real estate taxes and carrying cost, insurance and all that. But you've got to be creative. As Brian has done, one of our roles as accountants is putting together public-private finance in urban low-income areas. So definitely helping companies, real estate development, bring together this public-private financing. They are tools, especially historic tax credits. The federal government gives a 20% credit to investors who make investments in historic buildings. The state of Ohio matches a 25% historic credits. So if you have a $10 million project, $2 million can be raised from federal historic, $2.5 million can be raised from state. Of course, after tax, that may be 65%, not the entire thing. Then you have the PACE financing. What we did is we partnered with the state of Ohio Energy Loan and put it through the PACE financing, where with the port we created an energy district, and then the real estate taxes go to pay off the loan. So it's not encumbering the project. So that's a very good tool to use. Another tool we use typically is the new markets tax credit. It's a 20% subsidy. It's a 39% subsidy to the investor, but by the time the investor takes their margin, the CD takes the margin, the net benefit to the projects is about 20%. So a lot of the projects we've done in the city of Cleveland and across the country, we've done for Brian and for others in low-income communities, you take a $10 million project and you can bring it down to about $5 million by layering these subsidies. So now it's more likely to cash flow. And so that way, and then for small businesses like operating business, we're trying to bring a restaurant in or a sports bar. They're not getting any financing. Even we didn't get hotel financing. We had to go to Michigan. None of the banks were allowed to lend to hotels. So you have to be, creative in the financing. Small businesses to our restaurant tenants, we are helping them with financial projections, taking them to a CDFI in Cleveland called ECDI. They do loans that the banks don't do, but they're limited to $75,000. So, it's that type of trying to help come up with creative financing. I wish we can develop a community development financial institution here in Lorain to help finance that kind of thing.
Very interesting. Does any of the other panelists have a thought on pathways for small business financing right now? Okay. Okay, so the next question, Larry, how about you? Next victim, right? Given manufacturing's still significant role in Lorain County's economy, what types of things can manufacturers do, new technologies, new processes, to accelerate manufacturing growth moving forward? How will workforce development needs be impacted by this growth?
Perfect question. How many manufacturers do we have here?
One.
So I think that to me tells a story.
Yeah.
So let me start back with the infrastructure. I started our conversation off with the great things we have relative to our infrastructure. I also think about our economic or our institutions for higher learning. We have state recognized high schools in the area. We have a nationally recognized college in the area. We have great trade schools in the area. When you go out and you talk to business leaders, not one of them will say, I don't want to reinvest. I want to reinvest in my talent. I want to reinvest in technology. I'll buy new capital equipment. So what's stopping us from growing? Capacity, right? To grow, you have to have capacity. And manufacturing is a human-centric business. We need human capital. So where does it start? First, it starts with engaging the young youth coming up, the next generation, to understand that manufacturing is not a bad thing. It can be exciting. It can be rewarding. It can provide for your family. This is positive stuff. But they don't know. I mean, think about me growing up. Shoot, I didn't want to go into manufacturing. I want to be this high-tech guy. I did it for like 3 years. Like, boring. I need to make stuff, right? I need to convert. I need conversion happening. So how do you make that all happen? It's all of us in the room. We're the stakeholders, the community, the educational institutions, the industry within our area. That's what enables growth. And if we don't start by reaching out to the young generations, defining the curriculum that supports them, along with the business entities to define that need. And by the way, it's changing faster than we can keep up, right? 10 years ago, I would hire people to pack boxes. Today, I'm hiring people to design equipment and maintain and implement to pack parts into boxes. No, it changes quickly. We'll never win. So I'm asking for all of your help. Engage the youth, engage the next generation, engage the underemployed. Manufacturing has a real presence in our county.
Yes, it does.
Real presence in our area. A lot of successful companies have come through here. A lot of companies have stayed here. We need to keep it growing. Create the capacity in the human element, and that will grow the business.
Can I share something that actually just happened earlier this week? To your point, Larry, and we can do more of this. So the National Network of Manufacturing Institute, NMMI, which is through the Department of Defense and then an array of companies headquartered out in San Jose. So there are these NMMIs for manufacturing across the country. And they have a program through, it's called Flex Factor, or Next Flex. And the Flex Factor program is one focusing on kids, middle schoolers. And so we partner with them. And Cindy Kushner's here. Cindy, raise your hand, because she's the key to a lot of this engagement across the community with our youth and preparing them for careers. We started a couple of years ago with maybe a dozen students. This year we have, what, Cindy, 750, 800 who are in middle school who are focused on flexible electronics. And they're doing it, though, in a way by coming here and working on projects with electronics that are solving real-world problems. So it's connecting and making manufacturing really exciting, and they are part of creating a better future. So I think we can do more of those kinds of things, and again, you know, it's going to take all of us here to be able to do that.
Well,
Can I tag on to a little bit of that? So we participated, Thogus Products Company, we participated actually in the Flex Factor program. We hosted some students. And what was really exciting for me to see was the amount of concern that they had for their project, right? They defined a real world problem. They investigated it, they created a solution, and then they provided the economics to how to take it to market. This all happened in 5 weeks. You think about that. These kids, with the ability for them to solve problems and create solutions is amazing. And we need to engage them and make them, you know, just really give them the energy to keep pushing their thought processes along. If we do that, we'll be okay.
Well, and it's impressive that engagement at such a young age. You know, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And I remember how hard it was for me to decide what career path I would take, and I've changed that direction a few times. But as a young person, especially in middle school, to experience it and to be informed, you will make such better choices for yourself, and maybe not be in a profession because your parents think it's a great profession or your teachers think it's a great profession, right? I mean, exposure is the best way. Marcia, if I may, since this week was declared In-Demand Jobs Week by the state of Ohio, and knowing that 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030 haven't even been invented yet, how do we know what jobs will be in demand in Lorain County and Northeast Ohio? How do we educate students and retain adults for the jobs that are coming?
So I hope some of these students that are coming out of Flex Factor create some type of, you know, globes that we can see into the future for this. And if they could do that, that would be great. Yeah, that's the tough one, right? Because we hear the statistics. We had Thomas Friedman was here last year, and he talked about the rapid technological change that has been occurring since 2007. And when we think about 2007, we typically tend to think of when the dot-com bubble burst, right? But if you look at what are the innovations from a technology perspective that were unveiled in 2007, it was Google, YouTube, Facebook, open sourcing from a coding perspective, cloud computing, Airbnb. And so 12 years ago, you know, who was using their iPhone, on the iPhone? Who was using their iPhone? No one, it didn't exist. But our world in the subsequent 12 years, now in 2019, has changed so significantly because of all that. So he likened 2007 to only one other period in history, and that was when Gutenberg invented the press. And so if you think about the trajectory that then occurs with this rapid acceleration, you know, that's what leads to, by 2030, 85% of the jobs have not yet been created. So we have to be joined as partners with employers, higher education, so that, again, we are aligning. Because you can't even look at, for example, when we were creating the MEMS degree, and this was part of the challenge, there were no job classifications for some of the types of work that those individuals needed. So you can't even research the past. It really is designing hand in hand with our employers across sectors.
The agility that requires, it has to be constant communication, doesn't it?
Constant communication with partners, and then from a delivery perspective, you know, creating alternative forms of delivery. We can't be the same higher education model that we have always been. And going to the roots of Lorain County Community College back in 1963, we were the first community college in the state. The reason we were created came from manufacturers. Manufacturers came to the forefront because they could not find what today we would call middle skills. And so that became part of the development, then working back with the community. And so it still is the root. But we've had to learn how to be more flexible and continue to be flexible, because people don't learn in the same ways based upon 16 weeks that, you know, takes place with so much seat time. It's got to be our own innovation and invention simultaneous with all of this.
It's fantastic. And in Lorain County, I will tell you, across the state, this college is well-renowned, and the acknowledgement of the work that's being done here. So kudos to you in this room that work here and contribute. This one probably is for you, Jacob. Team NEO recently stated the economic development has become more strategic than transactional, focusing on talent, sites, innovation, and diversification. Does Lorain County need to focus on one of these points more than another?
Yeah, so maybe stepping back to the transactional versus strategic nature of what we're trying to do. I think historically, when you think about the economic development community, we've always been there trying to support businesses and to support business needs, but it's been in a somewhat reactive way, and that's been okay. But, you know, businesses come to you and they have a set of needs or a set of questions, and you help them with those the best you can. But what I hope this conversation is providing insight into is that to really help companies, not just today, but in the next 5, 7, 10 years, we need to think more strategically about the assets we have in Northeast Ohio and how those relate to companies. And we have identified 4 areas: innovation, talent, sites, and a more diverse and inclusive economy that we think can help drive those. To the point of what specifically does Lorain need, I would say we all need elements of each of those. From the talent perspective, we put out a study called Aligning Opportunities every year, which looks at the mismatch between what employers want and the talent pipeline we have coming out of colleges and universities. In just 3 sectors of the economy, IT, manufacturing, and healthcare last year, there were 39,000 jobs or talent short of what employers needed just to fill their needs in a single calendar year. That's only projected to get worse as population declines, we have an aging labor force, et cetera. So huge potential there. Innovation, I talked about our visit to Hitachi and the manufacturing base that we have here. When you think about the future of enabling technologies and what that could mean for our economy, whether that's additive manufacturing and 3D printing, the industrial Internet of Things. We worked with a small company in Lake County, machining shop, been around for 75 years. They put sensors on 39 of their machines, cost them about $50 a month. It was a $24,000 a year investment, which sounds like a lot up front. That $24,000 investment in a single year doubled their productivity and output and increased their sales dramatically. So it's thinking about new technologies, how we develop things like assessment tools around innovation that our partners can take out to companies and in 15 minutes give them a sense of their readiness and ability to take on IoT technologies. In thinking about sites, we need a competitive inventory of sites because, to my earlier point, we still make things here. We're a manufacturing economy. Last year, 2/3 of the requests we got from companies for property were for 250,000 plus square feet or 30 plus acres. 2/3, 65, 66%. That represented less than 20% of our inventory of property. And of that 20%, maybe 50% was up to the spec of what those companies needed. So a significant mismatch. How do we think about that? Well, partners like the Fund for Economic Future, Bradford's here, raise your hand, Bradford, who is helping drive these initiatives. How do we think about sites, existing infrastructure, access, public transportation lines, talent nodes, and how those all come together around traded sector driver industries that are so important here? How do we start strategically connecting those? So to some of the point from Brian's presentation, we aren't continuing to spend out while letting the assets we have die. And then finally, we have challenges as an economy. We cannot continue to grow. We cannot continue to fill the jobs we need to fill unless we think more about inclusion, diversity, and quite frankly, systemic racism and how race plays a role in the opportunities that we have in Northeast Ohio. We just pulled some data for a meeting Dr. Ballinger and I had yesterday. If you look at African American unemployment rates in a historically tight labor market, just last year, they were 16.5%. Their white counterparts were under 5%. So if we don't start to address structural issues like that over time, we're not going to make change. That's why we think a strategic approach over time is so important.
Fascinating information. And, Jacob's absolutely right. Those of us that's been in the economic development arena for a long time, we were much more reactionary. We could wait for the prospect to call us, and we often did. I will say one thing about Team NEO. So at JobsOhio, we have 6 regional partners that we work with across the state. Because typically, regions work together. Your partners and you probably don't know if you're driving past a township, jurisdiction, city, or county. People want to go to work and have a quality of standard of living. But with economic development, what has happened is because of the Internet of Things and the technology that's come in, part of the challenge is that we can no longer wait for the call. We're often eliminated before we even know we're in the game because so much access to information, whether it's the sites and the buildings. So to Jacob's point, I wanted to just share with you that Team NEO has some of the most in-depth research strategies among all of our 6 regional partners across the state. What they do in the way of research in knowing what's here, who's here in the way of companies, where the supply lines are, where they should be calling, what companies, what business retention strategies, and working with the local partners to do that. It is very, very quantitative in its approach, and I just want to applaud them. And sometimes, sometimes they are very humble, and sometimes we don't know what's happening, but compared to other peers, they're really doing a very, very nice job on this front.
Thank you. Can I say thank you? And you found the 20 I left up there for you?
Oh, yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the sites. how can Lorain County better maximize its assets and repurpose to improve the existing assets to attract and retain businesses? And I don't know, any thoughts? Anybody? Jacob, you want to go again? Just take the first swing, and then maybe what was that?
Repeat the question.
Repeat the question, sorry. So regarding sites, we're going to drill down a little bit on one of the items there, and that is, how can Lorain County better maximize their assets and repurpose and improve the existing assets? We heard from Radhika about some funding strategies and Brian earlier, but just in that economic development vein, is there any low-hanging fruit in the county that comes to mind, that if they put a little effort in a specific place or two?
So I think it gets in part back to the Job Hub strategy that I talked about, which is a regional strategy. And there have been 4 specific corridors identified in Lorain County around the Avon Westlake area, Elyria, I want to say, Oberlin, and Wellington, does that sound right, is the 4th area where you have infrastructure, you have a concentration of companies in place already, you have the assets you need to build on and to create greater and higher levels of development. And you can plug into a regional network of things like talent, transportation, and start to really compile assets in a way that I think can make portions of all of our region, but specifically Lorain County, more competitive. So I think the Job Hub strategy that a bunch of people in Northeast Ohio are really rallying around is a simple, easy way in the short term, though it'll take long-term funding and long-term strategic prioritization to start to build those out.
Very nice. Thank you, Jacob. And then, so in states like California, the economy is booming, yet 1 out of every 4 residents still live in poverty. Here in Lorain County, there are cities where the poverty level is also 25%, but alternatively as low as 4%. Lorain County's philanthropic institutions are working to make sure the entire groups of people are not left behind and unable to move up the socioeconomic ladder. How can sector partnerships be used to facilitate a stronger and more inclusive economic reality for our residents? Larry, can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I can. Excellent.
Thank you.
So interestingly enough, we recently formed a partnership here in Lorain County. It's called the Lorain County Manufacturing Sector Partnership. It came together in October of 18. So it came together pretty quick. And one of the things that we started talking about early on was we didn't want to be an organization that was burdened with bureaucracy. So we came up with a very simple mission statement: create awareness, develop talent, pipeline talent. It's really that simple. There's 8 founding companies within it with 4 affiliate partners, including the college and the joint vocational school here in Lorain County. And what I'm most proud of, right, we commenced this, it kicked off in October. We had to get some things straightened out in terms of what we're all about, right? Like, who's going to lead this thing? After 5 months, we have participated in approximately 6 events in Lorain or Cuyahoga County targeting awareness for people, not just the next generation, but underemployed as well, as manufacturing being a mechanism for them to improve their livelihood. Things that we participated included the Joint Vocational School in January kicked off what they call Career Day. So it's an opportunity for parents and students to come to JVS as a vehicle for growing their skill set. We were there to support them. We actually had an individual job fair here at the college. We supported the college's career fair when they had one. We participated at Keystone High School Career Summit. We participated in a machine trade show out in Cuyahoga County. These little efforts really just centered on our mission to create awareness. Touch points. And if you hit somebody, it's success. And I'll go back to the flex factor real quick, right? So we were fortunate enough to host a group of 30 students that came to us, and at the end of the day, The smile came to my face when one of the 30 said, when I graduate, I'm going to work here. 1 out of 30. Great. Thank you. 1 out of 30. Now we just need to develop them, create capability with them, retain them, and let them grow. So, putting a lot of effort in, but again, I'm going to ask for your help. 8 companies, that's it. 8. It's a simple investment of $2,500, 3-year period of time. But if we don't engage, if we don't make the investments, we're not going to win.
That's right.
Right? We have to put the effort in.
That's right.
So.
That's right. You have to play to win.
Absolutely.
Marcia, any thoughts on sector partnerships?
Sure, yeah. So sector partnerships, I think are key to it, as Larry just described, and we're very excited about that. But I think an important part of partnerships is also how within our community, Lorain County, our county, actually helps to lead some of this, working back in partnership with us. I know Commissioner Sherry Suida is here today, as well as Jerry Good and his team from the Economic Development Department. They all partner then back with all of us across the sectors to really help to accelerate by funding different types of, whether it's scholarships, work-based learning programs, working back with workforce development. So, when we think of sector partnerships, and you know, I think of a triad, which is the employers across the sectors, the government, and other public entities that are part of advancing that, and then the educational continuum.
Well, with partnerships, I think as you were connecting the dots with Jacob talking about strategies and sectors, and then Larry talking about, you know, specifically in manufacturing, and Marcia looking at, you know, those pockets with the partners, that alignment is something that only you all can do. Students, I don't think, really understand that wheel in its totality, and that's why your conversations and engagement with each other will produce results that nothing else can. So let's do this. You know, if this continues, the efforts that we're talking about here on the sector partnerships continues in a positive direction, hopefully partnerships in logistics, IT, engineering, hopefully they're not far behind, right? So one of the things that I wanted to just highlight very briefly for you, and then I have 2 more questions and we'll open for audience, is, and I think we touched on this earlier with opportunity zones. So Brian was gracious enough to highlight opportunityzones.ohio.gov. And it's a new website that was put up by the Ohio Development Services Agency, and it is a portal where all of the 320 opportunity zones in the state, including the 5 in Lorain, have been preloaded in. And then there's a site for you to say, hey, I want to expand on that and give you more information about it. I'm an investor and I'm interested in seeing what thoughts are around this property, or I want to know more. So if you haven't been to that site, you really should check that out. You can see that, you know, in my perspective, opportunity zones, both at the federal and the state level, in my perspective as an economic developer, there's been a lot of capital sitting on the shelf for a long, long time. This is a nice way to pull it out and to kind of get it moving in the economy. So we're just on the early edge of it. Let's see. I don't know, Radhika, do you have any thoughts on opportunity zones or the opportunity for that?
Yeah, definitely that's an added tool, but it's a very small incentive. There's only a 10% deferral of capital gains tax, and only for people who have capital gains. That is after investing for 5 years. Compared to new markets, historic, it's a very shallow subsidy. And the other one is if you keep it for 7 years, you get a 15% tax deferral, or capital gains deferral, by increasing the basis. The best benefit comes after 10 years. If you hold it and sell it, you don't pay tax. So now the problem is most of the opportunity zones are in very low-income areas.
Right.
And the rules of opportunity zones are similar to new markets, where it tends to more easily favor real estate holdings, where, because they use the same new markets qualifications, and that tends to be more geared towards tangible property and all those definitions being in low-income communities. So it doesn't easily help venture capital or small businesses. So those are some things that are being worked out nationally to make it easier. The IRS has given 2-3 guidances. I think as a community, if we can get together to find good projects, there's billions of dollars of funds floating around, but really the only ones happening are developers who are doing their projects and happen to have capital gains. They put it in themselves because they're taking the risk on the project. For an investor to come here, invest in a project for 10% tax deferral, are they going to take a risky project on? No.
Right.
And so I think if as a community you can find good projects or somehow get venture capital investment in, the goal is after 10 years it's going to be really beneficial. So finding investors who would invest in, maybe create a venture capital corridor and, get, it's some of the tax rules complicated. It's not that easy to make it happen.
Right.
But it'll, we'll work it out, as was done in new markets when it first started. It's a tax issues. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Radhika. Okay, so one more question. There is a nice economic revival happening in Cuyahoga County, particularly Cleveland. When you're out talking to prospective employers, how can you best differentiate yourselves from the surrounding counties, especially Cuyahoga? Ooh, it sounds like a little friendly competition. That's not uncommon, is it, Jacob?
No, not at all.
Okay, well, you kick us off.
Yeah, sure. So what I would say is there are always going to be reasons within kind of a dual framework to think locally and think regionally. And when I give presentations on kind of the business of what we do, I often talk about community development versus economic development. And as you sell community development, you're selling a package of goods and services that can be very unique to that individual, whether it's a home, whether it's a school choice, whether it's the amenities and assets. Is it walkability, living in an urban area, or the ability to have a bunch of property and whatever you want? And those are all very much decisions that can impact you at the local level. What I would say is that if you're trying to differentiate yourself from Cuyahoga County economically, you're probably doing it at the harm of your own business. And why I say that is when you think about Northeast Ohio's economy, 43% of people live in one county, work in another county. Companies don't care about political jurisdictions. They care about where they can source their products. They care about where their supply chains are. I talked about Lorain's supply chain linkages. Those are embedded throughout the region. Were we to become, let's say, parochial, and stop thinking economically and start thinking through jurisdictions, those relationships go away too, right? So thinking about the economy in the benefit of proximity, the benefit of labor, the benefit of supply chains, the benefit of assets, I think can only help businesses in sort of a rising tide approach in the end and make us all more competitive.
Very, very, that's fascinating, 43%. That's amazing. So that just shows you that, again, the jurisdictional boundaries sometimes really are just perceived on our part. The impact of being able to recognize the power of that partnership can be very strong. Any other thoughts on differentiating? Okay.
I mean, just from a development standpoint, I've done a few developments in Cuyahoga County. I think the joy of doing in a smaller county is the difference you can make. One project can really transform a downtown. And I think the city of Lorain is right at ground level.
Yeah.
It can only go up.
Okay.
So I think it's a good time to come into Lorain County and, at least the city of Lorain, and build up around downtown. I mean, it's got the waterfront, it's got everything there. It's just a matter of the economic development community putting some resources to get market rate housing, beautiful living on the lake there. It's just we need public sector commitment to subsidize some of the early developments to make it happen, but can only go up.
Thank you, Radhika. Okay, so Tony has said we'd like to get some answers that we can move Lorain County forward with. So let's throw out a hard one right now. This is our last official question, then we'll open up to you. And why don't we start with you, Dr. Marcia? What is Lorain County's biggest challenge right now that maybe we haven't talked about or haven't talked about enough?
So I think one of the greatest challenges, and this is a long-term ball game, right?
Right.
Goes back on the talent side. When we think about the number of high school graduates just a few years ago, we will not see in Lorain County that same number of high school graduates until 2050. And so the talent supply then of those who are coming through the system or coming through schools will be diminishing. And a lot of that is happening in our urban core communities, which have very high poverty rates, which have significant issues in terms of socioeconomic mobility. Just about 5% of those who are born into that lowest quintile, ever move to the top. And so, you know, our agenda and focus on the development of our youth to gain credentials and degrees so that they can have those meaningful types of jobs at Thogus and other places and can create a different mindset and culture within their families. But I'm also encouraged at the same time because there are great programs. I will share with you that last spring, 43% of the students who were graduating from our schools, and I'll use Lorain High School as an example, graduated with college credit from here, 43%. A decade ago, that hovered just a little over 20%. And so knowing that in those areas where we are changing that, they're first generation, college students, and so it will change their trajectory, but this is a long-term, I think, challenge yet solution, right? But that we've got to have more go on, but we're dealing with less.
Well, and that's a very interesting point because one of the statistics that is weighs heavy on my heart is that Ohio's general worker participation rate hovers around 62% for livable wage workers ages 18 to early 60s. 62%, which is equivalent to around World War II participation rates. Where are the other 38% of the population? So, and I hear county commissioners whom I meet with frequently, and they talk about, their responsibilities for public services and, and then I hear the employers say, I have employees who come to me and say, if I make 5 cents more than this dollar wage, then I'm going to lose my health care. So that bridge of sustaining and supporting without that cutoff, I don't know what that looks like, but I will say, I think one way to help address our worker participation, one way that we can lift up that workforce and the supply line and the capacity is to understand where are the missing workers, and they are in the state. We're the 7th largest state in the country with the 7th largest workforce. So anyway, thank you. And that was my only commentary, I promise. Anybody else have any questions? I would love to hear your thoughts, Larry, on the biggest challenges we're in.
Yeah, I will add a little bit to that. I don't want us to look through rose-colored glasses. I think we've talked a lot about engagement and collaboration and really powerful words, but they're words. Somebody has to do. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us, the community. We are the community. To continue to, we have to work. We have to work together. We have to support one another. And we can't come into this false pretense that, oh yeah, we talked about it, it's good. No, you got to work to an effort. You have to put effort in to get a result. You know, it's never ending. We just got to, we need to work.
Yeah.
And so that's my only take on it. It's, let's not be satisfied.
Pontificating is one thing, but rolling up your sleeves and
Doing.
yes, I hear you. About you, Radhika, what do you think the biggest challenge is for Lorain County right now?
Definitely the perception of the main, the city of Lorain. Like we get banks and all who say, hey, we'll finance the same entity in Cleveland, but we won't do it in the city of Lorain, because the perception is still like, there's too much, it's not going to work here. So changing that, and I mean, as this, a focus on the downtown, like Cleveland booming, spreads to the whole county. So focus on the downtowns and getting them vibrant again, and getting development, and I think really creating a financing entity that creates financing for bringing market rate housing. It's so easy to bring developments on lakefronts, We have such a beautiful lakefront.
Who has a lake?
I know, it's so beautiful, so it's having a financing entity to help, like a citywide, to come to the city of Lorain, boom, and it'll spread to the whole county, I think we have so much county. Cleveland did that, the focus on Cleveland, and it's really booming the whole county. So I don't know, I feel there's not enough support or investment in downtown. I don't know why, but.
Yeah, well, and our youth, we baby boomers probably didn't do a really great job, I'll own this, of being conscientious about the buildings and maintaining. We were building industrial stuff and didn't really think a lot about the condition that we were leaving our cities in. Weren't really great planners, I don't think. You can plan for growth, but how do you plan for change? So, our youth have told us repeatedly with their feet and their dollars that we want to be proud of where we live and work. We want to live in a downtown that is brightly colored, that's fun, that, that's where they go, because that shows pride in our communities. So, Jacob, what's the biggest challenge from your perspective for Lorain County right now?
Right, I'll stick with the talent theme. I'll use an example. I was at a manufacturing forum a few months ago, and the subject of manufacturing opportunity is 100,000 job openings in the next 5 years. Projected demand for workers is huge, right, as we see an aging workforce. There was a table of 8 or so of us, and I said, who here is a parent? And like 6 of us rose our hand. And I said, who here is saving for a traditional 4-year college education for their child? And all 6 of us rose our hand. So we're at a manufacturing event talking about manufacturing opportunity, and none of us were considering manufacturing opportunity for our own children. And I think until we get to a point where we're having conversations about not just opportunity, but what manufacturing is in 2019, about culturally how we're engaged in conversations that recognize beyond a 4-year degree and what that means and how impactful that can be, and that opportunity doesn't have to look the same for everyone, we're not going to solve parts of this problem with a lot of other factors too, inclusion and inclusivity. But I think changing the perception of what manufacturing is and why it offers a good career path is going to be one key component.
Very, very nice. I have a nephew who was a great scholar in high school and received an academic scholarship to a school in Britain. Went for 1 year and came home and didn't ever want to go back. And his parents said, well, now what? And he goes, well, you know what? I'm going to try this thing called RAMTech, Robotic Automated Manufacturing Technology Engineering certification, that he gets in 6 months. So he gets his certification in 6 months in that discipline, and he came out of that certification program making $55,000. He's 20 years old. We were laughing on the floor because we were so proud of him, but he just got there for a year in college and said, hey, this is not my thing. But education was, clearly. Okay, well, we'd love to entertain some questions if we haven't taken all the oxygen out of the room.
Room for 2.
2 questions. Okay, I think we had a hand right back here. Tony, if you could wait for the microphone.
We've been talking about manufacturing and high tech and all that stuff. I think another area that we need to focus on, which I see a lot in my day-to-day, is construction. I mean, you can call that manufacturing, but we're talking about all this development, we're talking about, you know, building, but we have a big skilled trades deficit right now. And, you know, to Jacob's point, how we focus on four-year universities, and I know we're at a college, but there's nothing wrong with, you know, advocating to become a mason or a, you know, or a carpenter or drywaller or something of that nature, you know, metal worker to build fences. I'm looking at John, but I think that's something that needs to be included in the conversation as well. I know the JVS does a nice job with their carpenter mason and I think electrical program that they have, but looking at focusing our energies on that and using the resources we have would be something to, you know, certainly focus on as well. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a clear, predictable, and a current shortage of skilled workers in the trades, and so one of the things that you know, we are hoping to see just across the state as some of the new certifications that the governor and the lieutenant governor is talking about, maybe they could be rolled out in high schools even. That would be great. And very well-paid professions, very well-paid.
I can add a little bit to that. So apprenticeships, working with the trades, is a growing area here at the college, working back with JVS and working across many of the trades. And so we have become a registered apprenticeship sponsor, and so both at the federal level, we're working with apprenticeships and are part of a new initiative through the American Association of Community Colleges to ramp that up, and so you will see an increased focus occurring with that, because you're right, I mean, it needs to be broadened, and we are focused on it.
That's great.
Just
any other questions for us this afternoon?
Just had one.
And
it's for you. It's for you. You talked a little bit earlier about the, I'll just phrase it, the benefits cliff. And I've been talking to a lot of people about this, I guess, in the last couple of weeks and learning a lot more about it. And Larry made a comment earlier about, you know, a lot of words get thrown out, but now it's time for action and everything. When it comes to this benefits cliff, though, who owns that problem? Really, I mean, is it the government? Who owns that? Is it? I think it's got to be helped with the private sector, but that seems to be something, from what I hear, is really something that maybe is causing that 38% to go missing. But what can be done, whether it's on a state level, local level? Who's working on it?
Well, I know there's commissioners in the room. They probably have a couple of comments about some of that. There's a big responsibility with commissioners. And what I would say is, you know, the benefits packages, I understand a lot of that is federal and state dollars. And the rules and regulations around a lot of those, I would suggest our legislators could be very helpful. But it's such a, I mean, it is, how do you help without first doing harm? Because many of those individuals are a most disadvantaged population. But there has to be a way to, and I don't know, Commissioner, if you have any thoughts or would like to respond. It's a very, I've heard a couple of commissioners say that a full package of benefits for a single parent with 2 children can be upwards of $35 an hour. And, you know, if I were a single parent, I was in that position, I got to tell you, I'm not giving up my health care, and I wouldn't do it to go to work for $12 an hour. So, you know, part of that is how do we lift? And I don't have the answer for you, but I ask every time I see our legislators, I ask them that question, because I think they, I don't know, Commissioner, would you agree that they probably, the federal and the state laws governing those practices make it very prescriptive. So I would start with a phone call with one of them maybe. I think they're working on it beginning. Yep.
And I would speak to that. Now, we're fortunate in our area that threshold is $25 rather than the $35 that we're speaking about, but we're in a different economic climate here. But I'm a newer commissioner, so I'm really just learning and engaging with a lot of these issues. But one of the things, once I discovered that number, is I believe we do need to have legislation that would have a decreasing scale of removal of benefits, so that we can get them past that threshold without removing so many hand-up items that it's no longer an incentive to move forward. And I think that may be something that I'm hoping to look into, and that would be an answer to bring people up. So,
very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, well, that concludes our panel. Can I give a big round for applause?